So, Invincible Fight Girl has joined the card of Adult Swim Toonami lineup, and we are here for a pre-match interview with creator and executive producer Juston Gordon-Montgomery.
Hey,
How are you doing, Justin?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Good. I am very excited for the show. I saw the first episode of San Diego Comic-Con and I've been excited for it ever since. So, to introduce the show, what is Invincible Fight Girl about? Not just a synopsis, but thematically.
Yeah, thematically, it's a story about people following passions, and in a world where people are extremely passionate about stuff. And it's a story of how that changes you and all of the adversity that you face, and the ways that it forces you to adapt and break through your limits, and the ways that it affects you and the communities that you're in.
Yeah. And it's a very inspiring show, but I'm also interested in what inspired you to create the show. Like, what made you interested in making a show about a world of superpowered wrestlers?
Yeah, well, for me, I mean, it starts with being a fan of wrestling. Um, and so as this is 2016, this idea is kind of starting to germinate as I'm looking around kind of in the Western animation space. I'm seeing that there's not a lot of shows that are talking about, these themes, like what it is to sort of follow your dreams. And I've always had people around me who have been passionate about lots of different things. And so I feel like I've always kind of gotten a front row seat to what that's like and all of the ways it can be very hard and challenging. And so that was when I kind of started cooking on it. And I was looking at shows like Naruto, I was looking at shows like Pokemon, and really appreciating how, something like Pokemon, for example, in some of the earlier seasons, um, they really dealt a lot with how Ash like processed losing and how he processed his, varying levels of competency against other people in that world. And then they sort of expanded the view by using Pokemon as this lens to talk about different larger universal truths like people's relationships with their passions, and things that uh, how people find their livelihoods. And so all of that to me was sort of really interesting, and it led me to this idea of like, well, I don't feel like we have done something like that with wrestling. I think not that is especially mature, over here in the Western animation space. And so it sort of drove me to start to ask some of these questions and challenge myself in what are all of the different ways we can examine wrestling as a larger metaphor for life.
That's awesome. And speaking to those shonen anime influences, Invincible Fight Girl definitely wears those inspirations on its sleeve. And watching the first episode, like, oh, this is so like the first episode of Naruto, My Hero Academia, underdog story about someone who, is told, hey, you can't do something and finds the encouragement and strength to pursue their dream. And also in the serialized pacing of it, where one episode leads into another, is so anime and so unlike a lot of Western anime shows, even action anime shows. I'm just interested in learning more about those shonen anime influences on your work and on the storytelling of Invincible Fight Girl as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, you sort of hit the nail on the head. Like things like Naruto, the way it so beautifully balances his development and the challenges that he faces and his need to sort of continue to look internally. Same thing for Deku, the constant need to look internally to find growth, to find whatever that extra piece is to push through whatever your limitation or whatever the immediate adversity is. That felt like a really, really crucial part of this story that I wanted to imbue, in the show, and making it feel like you were going on this journey with this character that was going to face like a lot of very hard obstacles, and that you as an audience were also rewarded for sticking on the journey, because even though it's going to be hard, like she's going to break through, and when you see it, it's like, oh shit, she did it. um I sort of recall my own experience, like watching Naruto learn the Rasengan, and like how amazing that felt when he finally like applies it. And just how fantastically those episodes were leading up to him slowly cracking the code on that. go to Dragon Ball Z and like all of the lead up to Goku going Super Saiyan for the first time, and the beautiful way that that storyline was just seeded and foreshadowed. And by the time you got there, you know, people now, with the benefit of hindsight, joke about, oh, it was like 80 episodes of Namek, but it's like those 80 episodes, when you got to him going Super Saiyan, you were out of your seat, losing your minds. So to me, that was a type of storytelling that I wanted to harness. Um, that ability to like take an audience on a journey, and when you get to that end point, they're now fully invested, and they feel like they've also like given something to the show, so the show is giving something back to them.
Yeah, that is one of the most rewarding parts of watching those type of series is just seeing the characters grow over a long period of time. It's so satisfying when they finally have that victory. I always think to Goku's victory at the end of the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament, after seeing him lose twice before, that eventual victory is just so satisfying.
Yeah.
And I'm interested. The show was originally pitched for Cartoon Network and now it's moved to Adult Swim. How do you hope the audience of Toonami Adult Swim responds to the show? And what audience do you hope finds the show and really resonates with it?
Yeah, I hope that the audience I hope the audience makes it their next favorite cartoon, honestly. We put a lot of love into it, and there's a lot of there's a lot in it to sort of reach a lot of different people. So I think that there's not necessarily one specific audience that we hope gets it. I hope that we're universal enough in the things that we're talking about, and in sort of the things we're exploring, that lots of different people find different entry points into it. And I especially hope that, you know, people who maybe aren't fans of wrestling like watch it and kind of decide to go give wrestling a check out.
Yeah. No, I definitely resonated with the show a lot, especially like the interactions between Andy and her parents, and then later Mikey and his father. That felt very personal, just like, your parents put your expectations on you of, following their footsteps or what they want you to be, and then you standing up for yourself to like vocalize, hey, this is who I am, what I want to pursue. Like,
Yeah.
where did that message, or did you draw from your own experiences in like writing out those character arcs and those themes?
Yeah, I think a lot of that, as I may have mentioned, kind of came from, you know, talking with the team, and us sort of sharing our different experiences of how we came to, you know, this point in our pursuit of our dream. And some of us having drastically different experiences. Like my parents were a little bit more like Andy's, where there was an initial sort of reticence, and then they were kind of like, "Oh, but it seems you've really thought this out. So we're gonna stand back and hope that, you know, you have a plan." And then there's lots of people I know whose parents were like Mikey's, and they're like, "What? No, that's not a plan. Like this is your path, and I'm doing this because it's eventually you're gonna thank me. Eventually you're gonna feel like, oh wow, like I really gave you something here." So to me, it was about trying our best to represent all of the different facets of what that moment in someone's life can be like.
Yeah. And just the challenges of like pursuing your dream and encountering setbacks
Yeah.
and like times of losing confidence. And I know for Invincible Fight Girl, this is a show that you've been developing for a long time, and there were several times where it almost seemed like it didn't get made. So your story is also one of resilience and just fighting for something you believe in. And
Yeah.
I really admire that. But I want to just hear a little more about some of those challenges and like how you overcome them, and like what any message you have for other aspiring creators out there pursuing and developing their passion project.
Yeah, I think you know, we were making this at a time where the industry was sort of in its kind of most tumultuous era. Um, you know, the network had a couple of different regime changes while we were even just trying to get this thing off the ground. You know, we weren't even in production yet. Um, and so there was a sort of weird point once we started breaking a lot of these stories, that the show kind of started imitating life, where we're talking about this character whose dream is in jeopardy, and then for all of us, we're kind of like, oh, that's kind of what's happening to us a little bit. And so there are ways that I think that strengthened our storytelling, and strengthened our resolve to just, if it was going to be a no from the powers that be, at least make sure that it was a really hard no from them. Um, which I think kind of is what I would say to a lot of people who are creatives and are trying to create in this tumultuous time. Number one, I would say bet on yourself, because there's no one who's gonna invest in you like you can invest in yourself. And whatever that means, maybe that means going off and doing it on your own. Maybe that means, um, literally investing in yourself, whatever that means. And the other thing I would say is, uh, to your point, it's like resilience is kind of the only weapon you have against the changing of any sort of tide, is the ability for you to not be moved and be like, well, shit, stuff is tumultuous, but I am not accepting no for an answer. Um, that's kind of what we tried to imbue in Andy as well. She's not necessarily the most technically gifted wrestler, or even particularly like talented, but she has the ability to just be like, I'm not fucking moving. So, I'm gonna figure this out one way or another. And I think that for all creatives is kind of that's kind of the thing that we have in our corner, is that there will always be more creatives.
Yeah, and that's a message that definitely resonates me as a creative person. But yeah, and Andy's just resilience, that she keeps standing up even after taking beatings from like Immaculate or M. Brandon, just keeps on fighting is really inspiring. And it feels so much in line with the kind of anime that you've been talking about, and or it's airing on Toonami, it's still airing on Toonami.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I think it's such a perfect fit for it.
Thank you.
But yeah, so I guess as a wrap-up question, like, you know, the show is finally premiering November 2nd on Toonami, and I just a reflection on how that makes I feel and what the show being a part of that block, if that like resonates with you in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel incredibly lucky and incredibly fortunate. I could not have imagined, this was not in the plan. The plan was, to be a kid and make it out of South LA, and just be able to draw cartoons. So to be fortunate enough to be uh, in the same lineup as some of the things that are kind of what got me here feels it feels insane and beyond belief, and I will I will never take that for granted. Yeah, I feel incredibly gratified, incredibly lucky. Um, and all I sort of can say is I hope that people find the show, and I hope that it does something for them, because, it did something for me in the process of making it.
That's wonderful. And I am a huge fan of the show. I was excited for it when it was announced. I loved the premiere at SDCC. I loved watching through the screeners. I'm so excited for
Thank
the
you.
Toonami audience, for so many people to discover and find the show, because I think it will be a lot of people's next favorite show.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Justin, thank you so much for your time today. And everyone, look forward to watching Invincible Fight Girl Saturday, November 2nd at midnight on Toonami Notes.